Bienvenidas and welcome to Latina Literati, the channel for Latinas and the Latina friends. So here we explore ideas, people, and places, and today I'm going to take you along on one of my favorite walks. It's along a lake called Lake Merced. It actually has a long history. Originally, the ohlone would fish along the lake. The original peoples of the Bay Area would fish along the lake and also the Pacific Ocean. They would look for seals and beached whales, and they would really find sustenance among the waterways of the area. In 1775, you have the Spanish arrive as part of the Anza expedition, and there the lake is renamed Nuestra Señora de la Merced, shortened to Lake Merced, with the invasion from the east of the North Americans. The governor of Alta California, Don Jose Antonio Castro, gave the land grant for that whole area to Don Jose Galindo, who in turn sold it for 100 cattle and $25 to the first alcalde. So before the first settlement of Spanish, the fishing village or town was called Yerba Buena. And Yerba Buena, the first alcalde, was Jose Antonio de Haro. And he purchased this land grant and in fact would mourn the killing of his two sons by Kit Carson by Lake Merced and eventually pass away there. So Lake Merced is a beautiful place, and depending on the time of year, you can see the mist rise or the fog. You'll remember that California was admitted to the US in 1850, and the Constitution, written in Spanish, was signed in the first capital of Monterrey. But I digress. If you'd like to hear more about the history of Alta California and not depend on movies like Zorro, I'd be happy to talk to you a little bit more about it. So let me know in the comments below if you'd like to know a little bit more about Alta California. As this is Indigenous Peoples Month, I want to dedicate this video to the 500 million Indigenous people in 90 countries, representing over 6% of the global population. And it's a month to not only learn about them, but also to ensure that we safeguard their wisdom and their perspective on how we should treat the earth and take care of our waterways and our air and land, which is sacred. All countries in the entire continent of America, from Canada down to Chile, have some Indigenous presence. And so it's incumbent upon us, not just this month, but every month, to really focus on ways of protecting their lands and ensuring their safety. But instead of my speaking on behalf of Indigenous peoples, I thought the best thing to do was to leave YouTube links in the description box so you can hear from really wonderful youngsters who have their own channels and talk about what it's like to be Indigenous in the modern world.
The face paint is representative of the Native American.
What?
And what I love the most is the ever constant humor, the amazing humor with which they meet the challenges of each day. I mean, I was laughing along with them, but really enjoyed seeing their life, whether they live in the city or whether they live on a reservation. Really interesting to see the young Navajo and other youngsters in these videos. So I'd encourage you to take a look at the links below and others so that you can enjoy them as well on this special Indigenous Peoples Month. As we support our Indigenous brothers and sisters, we put our good intentions to use, and we also find ways of helping ourselves, because obviously when we protect the environment, we protect our own families and communities. And so I'll also leave some links below in ways that you can help Indigenous peoples that are currently protecting things like our waterways against illegal pipelines and other initiatives of the fossil fuel industry. As families and friends gather this week for a holiday, I invite you to remember Marcus Aurelius, a Stoic Roman emperor from 2,000 years ago, who extolled us to every day arise in gratitude. When you arise in the morning, think what a privilege it is to think, to be, to live, to love. And so I would ask that all of you arise each day in gratitude. We celebrate this week especially, but every day is a day of thanksgiving. Every day is a day to arise in gratitude, as Marcus Aurelius extols us in his book, The Meditations. So I also want to share with you some beautiful staircases. There are secret staircases throughout the Bay Area, and one of them that I'm sharing with you now is off 16th Avenue. And these staircases are filled with mosaics. They're really art pieces by several artists. And so you can jog up and down them to get someplace, or you can just come to enjoy the artwork and enjoy the different staircases. So I have 4 books, 3 of them here. I always say that the best place to get books is your library, and this week 3 of the books that I have I got from my local library. I borrowed from them, and there are 3 women authors, and they talk about the experience of Native Americans in the modern world. The first one, La Rose, is about several generations of women who first confront the trappers and the people in the fur trade and the traders, and how generations really survive. And it also includes the boarding school experience. So really worthwhile, rich in detail. I would invite you to borrow it from the library, or I'll also leave links below where you can get it from independent booksellers online if you don't have an independent bookseller close to you. The second one is Bad Indians. Also talks about how a woman reconnects with her culture and reconnects with who she is in the modern world, in the context of the modern world as a Native American woman. Really worthwhile, because we don't all have the benefit of being raised in our culture. So how do you then reconnect with your cultural values? You have to do your own work and do your own healing. And healing is a big theme in these books, because obviously there's been a lot of trauma, as you can imagine. And then the third book is The Road Back to Sweetgrass. And sweetgrass is a concept throughout these books that is kind of like what you would like to smell and feel in the air always. It's like a feeling like something good is going to happen. And so again, women trying to find their way back to their traditions and reclaim who they are as Native American women. It's a wonderful story, also rich in detail. I really recommend these 3 books. And again, I'll leave links in the description box below for you to take a look at them. The 4th book I actually have on order, but I've read excerpts from it, and it's called The History of Everything. And it's really worthwhile because it completely changes what our beliefs are in terms of where things came from. And I'll give you an example. We now have documented proof that things like the Age of Reason or the Enlightenment would not have happened had there not been a contact and exchange of philosophies by the French, especially in Canada, but also in what is now the continental United States, with nations like the Iroquois and others. There were philosophers among the First Nations, indigenous groups, that imparted ideas like the concept of what they considered to be social organization and freedom and participation in direct democracy that were literally transferred back to France. And of course now, when you study political philosophy and the history, it's always, oh, they came up with this at the cafes of Paris or Vienna. No, actually no. We now know that it actually came from the indigenous, more advanced concepts of direct democracy. And one of my favorite concepts is when the head of a tribe got too uppity and decided that his ego was more important than the common good, they would call upon a group called the Grandmother's Council. And the Grandmothers Council would say, no, you've gone too far. We're taking the authority from you and we're going to elect another chief. And so that checks and balances is really interesting in terms of it is the wise women who would have made that decision, for example, in the Iroquois Confederacy and the nations there. So would invite you to, I'm going to leave the link for the book, and I'm going to definitely, obviously read it as soon as it arrives, but I really think that this is a game changer in terms of how we view the history of political philosophy, and the two gentlemen who wrote the book are anthropologists and archaeologists, authorities in their field. Unfortunately, one has already passed away. The other one is a professor in London. But in any case, really worthwhile reading. I really encourage you to read the 4 books that I'm going to leave for you below. And I would love to hear from you what books you are reading and what books you think I should be reading. So it's great to always hear from you and see what you're reading. So as always, I thank you for this journey with me, getting to the end of the video. And as always, I wish you health and I wish you happiness. Y siempre mucho amor. Muchas gracias.